All right, everybody, we are back. It is Jack Murphy. This is the Jack Murphy Live podcast. You can find me on Twitter at Jack Murphy Live, at the website, jackmurphylive.com. Go to Amazon, get my book, Democrat to Deplorable, Why 9 Million Democrats Ditched. Why 9 million Obama voters ditched the Democrats and embraced Donald Trump in 2016. And if you want to learn more about the Liminal Order, that is our all men's organization dedicated to our three core values of masculinity, brotherhood, and sovereignty. Check it out, liminal-order.com. But enough about me. Today is all about the man of the moment right now, it seems like, Christopher Rufo. Chris, how you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Didn't sleep too much last night. Was in a pretty celebratory mood, very excited. But it's good to be with you this morning.
Yeah, fantastic. Thanks. We've been trying to get this arranged for a couple of months now. And boy, did we get this thing scheduled at the right time. Because, dude, you are literally blowing up all over the place. You're doing tremendous work. You're having a real impact. It must be a lot of fun. You having fun right now?
Yeah, I am. That's the thing. I feel like I'm just having a great time. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And once you kind of click into that, I feel like anything is possible.
Indeed. Once you align yourself with your core values, align yourself to the values of the universe, everything starts to get easier when you're doing good and doing well all at the same time. It's a fantastic feeling. And, kudos to you and congratulations for that. I've been watching this and it's been really impressive. And for me, your work has a personal connection for me because I have been working on writing about critical race theory, wokeism, social justice warriors, radical feminism, intersectionality, Marxism, how all these things have come together for years now. And, I dedicated chapters and chapters in my book to this subject written in 2017. And for me personally, it's just been amazing to see all of this come to the forefront right now at this time. And, you're helping lead the charge. Swords up, which I love. And I hope we can all adopt that because that's where we need to be right now, sort of wartime mode, and going out and attacking. So what I like to do on Jack Murphy Live here, this is long form. This is not going to be quick sound bites. I want to know about you, bud. Like, I've been watching your work, but I think a lot of listeners don't know you personally, and I want to start with that. I want to find out your perspective, your setting, your context for this work, and then we'll build up to your recent work and your success and talk about what it means for the country. So can you give us a little bit of background, man? Like, how did you get into journalism? Where are you from? Where'd you go to school? How did you get into the point where you could start doing this kind of work?
Yeah, well, my path is not a common one and maybe not even a recommended one. But, I grew up in California, in Sacramento. My father's an immigrant from Italy. My mom was a daughter of an automotive engineer from Detroit. And I grew up in this kind of, very kind of progressive atmosphere. It's California. We're kind of a stone's throw away from Berkeley. And that for a long time was my reference point. I kind of saw myself as a young man of the left, was kind of protesting in high school and kind of like embracing all of those things, looking at all the videos from Berkeley 1968. And that was really kind of my frame of reference. And we're talking before the show, I went to Georgetown for my undergraduate degree. And, that's kind of where things like politically fell apart for me. And I got involved with some of the kind of lefty campus organizations. And I remember sitting in like some meeting or some subcommittee, and these kind of like very affluent, very privileged people were, organizing a hunger strike on behalf of some cause. And it just felt so phony to me. That's the thing that happened. And really kind of my disillusionment with left politics was really at first personal. It's saying, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. These people are total phonies. It's like, it's kind of a performance to satisfy their own kind of status needs or social desires. Has nothing to do with actually helping real people. So kind of like just clicked out of politics altogether. I kind of chanced on a job working on a documentary film crew and spent the next decade traveling around the world, producing documentaries for PBS, for Netflix, for Japanese TV, for other broadcasters. Nice. And I just wanted to kind of hit the streets and go out in the world, have some adventure. I certainly did. And then kind of through kind of study of the actual world as it is, through kind of my own academic study, I kind of started drifting towards the right. The ideas made sense to me. And then having a family and kind of getting a bit deeper sense of what's meaningful, I started kind of, drifting rightward in my own private life, but then very much silent publicly, because the documentary world, as you could imagine, is very progressive and very intolerant. And then about 2 years ago, I made the decision. I'm done being silent. I'm done being just kind of putting my tail between my legs, and decided to bust out.
Was there a moment? Was there something that happened? Was there an event where you finally were like, all right, that's it. I've had enough.
I just saw the end. I saw the end of the road in my documentary career. And, as far as documentary careers go, mine was a very successful one on the outside. But on the inside, I just felt I felt restricted. I felt kind of confined. I felt like I couldn't express myself in a really meaningful way. And I was kind of trapped in this kind of brutal and angry and depressive industry that was, had become over the years hyper ideological. And that's kind of when I realized that I think I was maybe on vacation with my wife and actually my father. We went back to our village in Italy. And I kind of just had a moment where I realized, this is the end of this. I can't keep going this way. I'm going to be deeply unhappy. And then I kind of started scrounging around to try to figure out, hey, how can I kind of politically engage? And, one of the first steps was doing a Claremont fellowship, and I did the Lincoln fellowship. And it's funny because they actually called me. They said, hey, we really like your application. We kind of don't know who you are. We kind of maybe think you're a left-wing plant. Can you prove to us that you're actually a conservative, because you're like a documentary guy? It worked out, and I'm very close with all those guys now. But it was really kind of like a rough transition, just to kind of get out of one world and into another.
Yeah, I completely understand that. If you don't speak your truth, especially in an industry like documentary filmmaking, which I think is about getting truths out, right? And telling stories and telling people's personal stories, or there's a variety of subjects, but really it's about revealing something to the audience. And if you're in an industry like that and you can't express your true thoughts and your true self, that must be, it's stifling and suppressive and oppressive to anybody. But then doubly so a creative person with ideas and opinions and the means by which to express themselves. So I completely understand that. I had similar experiences. I just simply could not keep my mouth shut over time. And, I think we probably have a little bit of a similar vibe in that I've kind of been a vigilante a lot of my life, where if I see something that's wrong, I have to say something, or I have to fix it, and when it's your own truth, it's like, you got to just get it out, man. You just got to get it out. And if you don't, you kind of go crazy. I remember I interviewed a guy a while back, and he said that he had an uncontrollable urge to express himself. And I think that that's part of what makes somebody get into journalism or art or something like that. So interesting point on the Claremont Fellowship. We talked about it right before the show. I did not know that about you. I tend to gravitate towards the Claremont guys. I think we have a lot of overlapping worldviews and opinions, and Brian Williams and those guys are fantastic. And I've got another Claremont guy coming up next week, and another one after that, now that I think about it. So Claremont definitely doing great work out there. And I wonder too, who wrote we'll get to this, but who wrote the actual president's order, because it reads like somebody from Claremont had written it. So it's very well done, and I love that. I too went to Georgetown, a school of foreign service, just like you. And it was interesting to me there to see, I got the full dose of globalism, multiculturalism, the whole thing, identity politics. And when it's coming from the richest, most elite, most successful, exclusive people in the whole world, it's especially grating to deal with. At the time, I wasn't super clear on how it was all working out for me, but now I look back and I'm glad that I got that education. But I certainly don't hold those same views as what was pumped into me at Georgetown. So, all right, you're a documentary filmmaker. You're literally traveling around the world doing stuff for big names and great projects. And, You decide to make a change, and that change is to get into journalism. So where did you go? How did you start? What was the first step? Where'd you land first? Like, how did you get the ball rolling here?
Yeah, kind of like a series of events. I'm been in Seattle and in the Seattle area the last 6 years, so not exactly kind of a DC to New York corridor place. We're actually way out there. But a mentor of mine, a guy named Bruce Chapman, who was the census director for Ronald Reagan, started a think tank here in Seattle, and he said, "Hey, Chris, you've been making this documentary on American poverty. You'd be great at looking into the kind of doing a policy paper or kind of a long essay on homelessness in the Pacific Northwest." And I said, "Yeah, I've been meaning to kind of move more politically. This is great." So he, provided kind of a small grant to write this article, essentially a long kind of feature magazine article. And I finished it. I wrote it. I was pretty happy with it. And then I had met Rehan Salam, who was then the editor of National Review. We had met because I had done a documentary on the Uyghur Muslim minorities of China. And we had kind of exchanged information. And I said, "Man, I don't know anyone except for this guy, Rehan Salam." So I sent it to him and he said, "Hey, this is not a good fit for us, but let me connect you with City Journal at Manhattan Institute." And then they published the piece, and then, kind of blew up. I think like you got shared 100,000 times on City Journal's website, which is actually kind of a lot for a policy magazine. And then shortly after that, they said, "Hey, come out to New York, talk to us." And then they said, "Hey, why don't you, become a contributing editor for the magazine?" And that's really kind of the start of all this. And I think, I had like no formal journalism training. I kind of, in a way self-taught. But the thing about making a documentary is like you learn all of the essential journalism skills. And honestly, I think you actually learn them better than 99% of journalists, because when you're making a film, you have to gain very deep access with people. You have to negotiate to be in their life over months and sometimes years. You have to get all of their thoughts and feelings out. You have to do it in front of a camera, in front of lights, in front of a microphone. And then you actually have to like put yourself out there, It's like I've been thrown off a horse and broke my ribs in the taigas of Mongolia. I've been arrested by Chinese secret police in Xinjiang. Like,
Oh, wow.
doing some political reporting isn't really gonna, phase me in any way. So,
dude, you got arrested by the secret police in China?
yeah, man. If you're making a documentary in China about the Uyghurs,
whoa. Tell us that story, man.
Yeah. Well, we kind of. It was 2008, and I was kind of working on my second film. I was looking at this, actually a beautiful story, and it's available on my website for free for folks who want to see it. I think it's still for free. But making this beautiful story, there's kind of the Han Chinese, the kind of dominant ethnic Chinese, and then there's the Uyghur minority in the kind of northwest, kind of far west of China, and now it's absolutely horrific. I couldn't make a film there now. They've put essentially more than 1 million, maybe 2 million Uyghurs into what can really be called kind of re-education or concentration camps. And these are two groups that have nothing in common. China kind of annexed their territory. They've repressed this minority group for many years, since 1949, I believe. And yet the story that I was telling was this one baseball team that had, they were the only baseball team in 1,000 miles in any direction. And they had been inspired by Jackie Robinson to have a multi-ethnic baseball team. Wow. Really one of the only places where they cross these segregation lines. And then at the end of the year, they play one game a year against a team of Tibetans in the Tibetan highlands. So it's this kind of like epic story and journey. And, I was very young at the time, and a couple times, really one time that was actually quite scary, detained by kind of, uniformed and sometimes plainclothes Chinese security, and kind of dragged into a basement of a police precinct, walking past, looking at the kind of iron chairs with the arm and the leg cuffs, thinking, "Oh shit, I might not come out of here." But what I did was like kind of by instinct, and then in retrospect, kind of brilliant, where I just played dumb. I kind of pretended to be a dumb American surfer dude, tourist, and just kind of, answered their questions in the kind of dumbest way possible. until they got frustrated with me. They held us for a couple hours and then they let us go. Yeah, so that's the kind of thing that happens.
So you've been laying it on the line for the stories that you think are important that the world needs to know for some time now. So this is who you are, man. When you were growing up, were you a fighter? Were you vigilante? Did you
Always.
right the wrongs?
Always, yeah. And it's something like, it's crazy. I feel like I was always fighting, like not physically. I mean, sometimes physically if I had to, but typically not. I'm not a particularly big or physically intimidating person, but I was always fighting intellectually. I was always kind of, trying to look at the world, trying to see what was wrong with it, and then trying to fix it. And I think that really got beaten out of me for a long time. In the documentary world, kind of just the rhythm of business in the documentary world, it's kind of these long multi-year projects. The industry itself is kind of constrictive culturally. And then I just feel like, in my 20s, I just kind of was living a pretty extreme lifestyle, frankly. But yet like not really channeling it into a fight for some justice or some good in a real kind of visceral way. And I think like I missed that. And I may not have been as effective a fighter at 23 as I am now. But certainly like kind of reemerging into this in the last 2 years, really, since I've engaged politically, has been great. And sometimes people are born to fight, and that's just how you are, your nature. And I think I maybe even denied that nature for some time. I kind of tried to put it in a box, or people tell you, oh, you shouldn't do that, or you're an asshole, or you're this or you're that. And people kind of shame you out of it. And then, I kind of hit this acid test where it's like, when you come out as a kind of conservative writer, intellectual, political figure in a very liberal city on the West Coast, you have no choice but to fight. And honestly, I'm loving it. It's like, I feel like rejuvenated,
Yeah, no kidding, man. I have had very, very similar experiences out here. I found myself working in education sort of by accident, sort of through the back door of real estate, because I was a real estate developer and I got into running charter schools. And before I knew it, I became executive director of charter schools in Washington, D.C. And I became a turnaround expert, a school turnaround expert, where I would get hired to turn around the worst performing charter school systems in the District of Columbia. And I was able to do it once, not even just once, but twice, actually, and actually almost 3 times. So like it became a passion and a mission for me, fighting for people that didn't have a voice, and fighting to change and solve wrongs, to right wrongs, and to help people that needed help and needed a voice. And I found the work to be so rewarding and engaging. And then we were successful. And then people found out, long story, me getting doxxed by Antifa, but people found out that I was writing about conservative issues through a pen name, writing about sanctuary cities, writing about radical feminism, doing satirical takes on radical feminism to mock them. And covering. I would go as an independent journalist and cover alt-right events and Antifa fights in the square in front of the White House. And just because I was there, people thought I was a Nazi, and then they wanted to destroy me. So they did. They attacked me. They destroyed me. They got me fired from my job. They took away all the things I had worked for, all the good work I was doing, simply because I had a slightly right of center, or now it's probably considered radical right, I don't even know, perspective, which is basically that like we were all created equal. Everybody should have equal chance and equal opportunity. And let's make sure that happens. Not that everybody needs to be the same and we need to make that happen, which is pretty much the dividing line right now. So in Washington, D.C., I have to fight every day as well. And it's been a challenge personally. I'm sure you've had similar experience out there with sort of your old life and old friends now that this is all public. Have you had any schisms like in your social life or family, or do people like look down on what you're doing now? Has it damaged your relationships in any way?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think with family, definitely not. My family's very proud of me. My family is so supportive of anything I do, and they just want to see me happy. And I think that they've seen me really emerge and to myself and just feel happy. And so they're very supportive. My grandmother, who is 93, she's actually a big progressive. She's very far left. She always has been, kind of Vietnam War protesting and all that. And but she's even happy for me. She's like, I seen you on the Tucker Carlson. I really don't like that guy, but you did great. So the family's great, and my friends are great. And yeah, I lost friendships for sure. I lost friendships. I lost funders. I lost, creative collaborators. Oh, I can't work with this guy anymore. Right. But I'll tell you what, for every friend that I lost, I gained 10 much stronger friends.
Indeed.
And that's the thing. And it's like, it's so funny because it's like, hey, we were friends for years, and I tolerated and accepted and respected your political opinions. You just didn't know mine because you never asked. Right. And then, when the tables turn just even slightly, you're unable to show that same kind of toleration or kind of respect. And I think that's a shame, but it really kind of weeds out the people who are truly your friend from the people who aren't. And I still have a lot of friends that are on the left, and we're still great friends and kind of razz each other. And it's good fun because we can see that there's like a world and a life outside of politics. But,
right.
Through the political activism, I guess, or political writing, I've made a lot of great friends, very strong friends. And one thing I think is, helpful to me and anyone who's listening that finds themselves kind of marooned or stranded in a big blue city. I set up a group of about 10 guys, all kind of conservative men in Seattle. And we'd have monthly kind of off the record private dinners. We'd get a private room at a restaurant. We'd kind of, talk trash and talk business and talk politics and talk family. And we all had the same perspective. And it just felt like every month you'd have that kind of backstop and that kind of support, that kind of community and that kind of place just to talk. And it's like astonishing that we're in 2020, the United States of America, the First Amendment on paper is standing strong. But the culture that we have is extremely kind of repressive. And you almost feel like if you are anywhere outside of the most kind of rigid ideological progressivism, you're a dissident. And for a while that bothered me. This is not fair, and kind of moped and pouted about it. But then you kind of just have to buck up and say, that's the world as it is. That's reality. Are you going to kind of like cry about it, or are you going to go about accepting it and then changing it? And that's the thing. Dude. Yeah, that's it. That's all you got to do.
Amen to that. I mean, you basically just described the mission statement of the Liminal Order, but we don't just do it in one city. We actually have hundreds of men all across the country doing virtually what you described right there, plus a whole lot more. We've got chapters in probably 15 to 20 cities across the country. We got meetings all the time. And it's just the same thing you're describing, which is like finding a place to relate to people that share your worldview at a time in which there's just seemingly chaos and negative energy all around you. So guys out there, if this sounds good to you and it sounds interesting, check it out, liminal-order.com. It's exactly what Chris is talking about and a lot more. But there is an urge to gather up, to squad up, and to get with like-minded men and to build a community because, communities, strong men, strong family, strong community, strong nation, hopefully, is really the goal there. So that's interesting to hear that you've had similar experiences and sought out similar solutions to the same circumstances that I had. So we've got you now. You're in the game. You're working with City Journal. How is it that we come to critical race theory?
Yeah. So for City Journal, like the last, I guess, almost 2 years now. Wow. I've been covering kind of West Coast disorder. So I've been covering homelessness, addiction, mental illness, crime, kind of hyper progressivism, defunding the police, all of these kind of urban issues. So that's been my beat. I've done a ton of work in that area. And the critical race theory stuff was something I'd seen emerging in practice in the documentary world. In the documentary world, there are kind of these siloed programs. They're kind of race-based, kind of in some ways, kind of racially siloed programs. The ideology at the conferences I was going to was very much a kind of identity politics matched with kind of grievance and redistribution, where documentary filmmakers would be like, I'm not making any money making my movies. Like, someone should give me other people's money. And it's like, dude, like, what? You're like a 40-year-old man. What are you doing? And then the identity politics started getting really strong to the point where, like, if you look at the Sundance Film Festival, the kind of pinnacle of documentary success, like every film documentary, and maybe fiction, although I'm more familiar with documentary, look at the last like 5 years. Every documentary that's entered the competition at Sundance that has shown there is essentially an identity politics ideological piece. I mean, it is like so focused. And the irony is that like a film will go to Sundance, right? You think it's a big success. It'll get on Amazon and then it'll have like 12 reviews, you know? So these documentaries that are like reaching a smaller and smaller audience because they're on a subject that most people aren't engaged in, like very high, hardcore kind of identity issues. And yet they're at the top of the kind of prestige totem pole within the documentary industry. And I just like kind of realized like this is a total dead end. And I just kind of jumped from there. And I think, you know, fast forward now a couple years and critical race theory is kind of coming up again in the news. And it all started with an anonymous tip. I got a tip from someone who said, hey, City of Seattle is holding racially segregated civil rights trainings. And I just said, wait a minute, the Office of Civil Rights theoretically would be fighting any instance of segregation, is actually perpetuating institutional segregation. And I did a records request. I got all of the information. That story kind of blew up. And then I became this kind of de facto, like, documents, like leaking kind of like a mailbox. Right. And I started getting just hundreds and hundreds of leaked message about this stuff. And I kind of realized very quickly after that first story took off, this is a hot story. This has fire. This has energy. I'm the right person to handle it, and I'm going to make something out of this. I'm going to push this as far as I can.
Dude, that is fantastic. And I'm going to go back just a second, but we're going to pick up right at this point. In the film world and in the art world in general, at least my recollection of art was that the art was the dissident side, right? Like art was the one that was supposed to be pushing the envelope, you know, questioning the establishment, challenging the narratives. But somehow, so quickly, it seems, is that this radical theory, this radical perspective of identity politics has somehow taken over as the establishment and mainstream, yet the artistic people and my old, like, you know, libertarian raver friends from the 90s, you know, they all thinking now that they're still being rebels and punks, but yet they're really like towing this line. So you saw that in the art world. Have you seen that? What do you make of this sort of the fact that, like, the quote, there's no dissident art?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think it's, you know, to me, like, there's some great, and not to minimize the accomplishments of some of my, you know, former colleagues, there's some great films, there's some great filmmakers. But yeah, I think like the kind of institutions and the structures, they see themselves as kind of like on the vanguard, on the forefront of something, but it's like, hey, the stuff that you're pushing is indistinguishable from the stuff that they're pushing in every Fortune 500 company kind of human rights or human resources office. It's indistinguishable what you see in Hollywood, in media, in the foundations. Like, you're not taking actually any risk because everyone from the New York Times to the Ford Foundation already agrees with you. You're just kind of replicating. They're basically just replicators. They take some kind of dominant ideology, which they kind of mistakenly think is kind of edgy or progressive. And then they just kind of unconsciously replicate it through kind of hundreds and thousands of these stories. And I just find it, like, honestly, just pathetic. And it's like, what's the point? What are we doing? Like, another one of these? Come on, people. Like, let's push a little bit. And and I think that, you know, in a way, it's frustrating, right? But in a way, I came to terms with it because I said, you know, when was kind of like dissident writing or dissident art ever kind of funded and supported by the establishment? That's just not how it works.
Right.
And in order to truly push, you have to be willing to take risks. And I think that is really the whole ball game. You have to put yourself out there, kind of into the maw of these institutions that have the kind of financial and cultural power to obliterate you. And that's it. I mean, you have to be able to kind of spiritually just shove yourself out there into the gears and just say, I'm strong enough. I'll be able to take it. And that's not what you get in most of the kind of art world. What you get right now is a kind of followers, lackeys, kind of mimesis kind of generators. And that's cool. I mean, but it's indistinguishable from, being a 9-to-5 or somewhere, kind of doing what the boss tells you. It really is the same mindset, the same patterns. And I think that it's much more fun to be on the outside pushing in.
Yeah, 100%. It's way more fun doing that. I came to the same point here now where I'm independently funded. I'm totally uncancelable. I'm anti-fragile. I'm doing exactly what I love, working on this mission, similar as you. And you're right. You do just have to stick yourself into the maw of the machine. You have to be willing to get ground up. I got ground up first, and then that sort of gave me a superpower of like being uncancelable. And then when like yourself, when I see myself take action that takes a little bit of courage or strength, people just fall right in behind because they want to support you, and they want to support acts of courage and acts of real critical thinking and actual real work and taking challenges and taking risks. And so, kudos to you. I knew as soon as we made contact on Twitter and started observing each other that we would have good energy and like similar vibes. And I'm really glad in talking to you now. Really, this is the first time we've talked that it's being confirmed for me, because I can feel that energy, dude. And it's something that people want to get behind, because we're all looking for leadership. We're all looking for people to answer the question of like, what are we going to do about this? Yeah. And you've really taken the ball and just started running with it. So we'll latch back into the story now. The Seattle stuff, the Washington stuff. What is the time period that happens? Like, what is the context, sort of the national context? Where were we in the riots, or George Floyd, or Portland, or whatever? Like, give us some context on when that person reached out to you in Seattle and you started pushing that story.
Oh my God, I don't even remember. It's been such a blur. So I reported on the Seattle on July 8th of this year.
Okay.
So
man, it's been so fast.
July, how long? Wait, is that like 2.5 months?
Yeah.
So 90 days, let's say, because I worked on it a little bit before July 8th. So it was really like a blitz. Honestly, looking back, it's kind of like I'm in that like cartoon where the like wind is blowing against you and your face is like pulling back. It's like, it's been like a rocket ride, but it's basically 90 days. And I think like looking back, like it's been a wild ride, but I did my first report about 3 months ago on these critical race theory in the institutions. And then I just kept hammering at it and hammering at it and hammering at it, developing news cycles, breaking news cycles, managing news cycles, amplifying it on Laura Ingraham, on Tucker Carlson, on Neil Cavuto, getting it to that kind of television audience. And then just like, at one point, I can't remember exactly when, I think maybe it was at the beginning of August. I just visualized it. I just said my goal. And then I publicly expressed it on Twitter, and my friends texted me. They're like, dude, you're a megalomaniac. You're insane. You're like ridiculous. Like, get out of here. But I just said, hey, I'm going to persuade the president of the United States to issue an executive order abolishing critical race theory in the federal government. That's my goal, and I'm going to get it done. And I had this like just intuition that like it was totally possible. Like, yes, I mean, I'm going to do it. And then kind of it really, I'll kind of give you the story because it's interesting, the backstory.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I'm pushing these stories. I'm breaking this news, writing the context and analysis. And then Tucker's guys calls me, and I've been appearing on the show the last year or a little bit longer, every month or so. And they said, hey, Tucker is excited about this. He wants to do it, but he wants to basically do a joint opening monologue with you, just like putting this story out there. And then I said, all right, wow, that's big. All right, cool. So I'll work on something. So I like run to the office, drive up to Seattle. I'm like typing it out. All right, we're going to get a teleprompter so I can kind of do the monologue back and forth with him. And then they call, they say, hey, the studio doesn't have a teleprompter. We can't get one to you. So Tucker's going to set it up, and then you basically need to do a 3-minute report, just ad lib, outlining all of the work you've done and what you want to do about it. And I'm kind of like, my heart's pounding. It's like, holy moly, like, they have a teleprompter. That's easy to do. You read. But then I just kind of like, I remember I was in the studio and the guy who runs the studio, I won't tell you which one, I don't want to get him in trouble. He's also like a big time kind of conservative guy in Seattle. He's like, oh man, you got it. Just get it. You're there. So I kind of just like get in there. I just kind of like mentally just black out. And then I just feel like machine gun fire coming out of my mouth. Just and then at the end I had rehearsed the line. I just says, and I call on the president to immediately issue an executive order, blah, blah, blah. I had rehearsed that line in my head and I was like, that's the money line. And then I had this weird feeling after I was done. I just kind of like click back in, and then I get texts from the producers like, that was amazing, great job. And I was like, I know for sure that the president just watched that. And the next day I get a call from the White House, says, we want to take action on this.
Okay. I love how you tell that big, long story about Tucker and the teleprompter and your tunnel vision, which I have had. Like, I've used to do Muay Thai fights, and dude, you get in the ring, you can't see anything, you black out. There's just, you stop thinking. It's your training totally takes over, and you just kind of go. I know that feeling, but you tell this very nice, long, passionate story about Tucker, and then you're like, yeah, and then the White House called.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. It's a weird experience. I'm just kind of like
who called you? What did they say? What happened?
The guy called me and he just said, hey, I'm calling on behalf of the president. And I think at this point I might be able to say so, as the chief of staff. And when you get a call from the kind of the chief of staff to the president of the United States, you're kind of like, I mean, that's never happened to me before. So I was thinking like, wow, this is cool. I'm like in my little house here in kind of rural Washington State. My kids are around. It's pretty early because it's West Coast time. And then that was the moment I was like, all right, this is like, it's on now. And they have a very capable team, and they're very kind. And I provided, the material that I had and the insight and analysis I had. I kind of, gave them what I had and then let them run with it, because I kind of like my work was done and I was doing that kind of the handoff. And I'll tell you, the White House, like I think it was like 3 days later, the OMB issued the memo basically saying no more of this in the federal government. It's over. 3 days. And it's like, I'm thinking, if you're a kind of observer of politics, you say a President Jeb Bush would have never done it, and certainly wouldn't have done it in 60 days or in 65 hours. Right. And the thing about the president is, and whatever your views are on him, mine have changed over time, but it's like he gets it done. He's unafraid to jump into the fights that need to be fought, and he pushed it. And then the OMB kind of pushed it out. It caused this big kind of media cycle and firestorm. A bit worried I was going to get trashed by everyone, but I emerged unscathed, even though the New York Times and the Post and NPR all came after it. And then kind of, I did some kind of cleanup work, basically said, hey, a lot of these agencies are still just violating this order. You can't do that. It's against the law. It's it's kind of unconstitutional overreach. And then yesterday, the kind of the 10 megaton bomb dropped, and it's a full executive order. Honestly, I kind of visualized the goal, and this, extends well beyond it. I mean, the White House policy team, the White House lawyers, they basically figured out how can we push this out the furthest. And I'll give you kind of a brief kind of encapsulated version if you haven't seen it.
Well, let's hold off on that, because I want to dig into the memo in detail.
Okay, great.
But like, dude, when they call you from the White House, does it say like unavailable number, or does it say the White House? Because I need to know, because I never answer my phone.
Yeah, it was just a 202 number. So I think it was probably just a cell phone. Oh, and I just kind of like I had kind of been back and forth over email with people overnight, because they're like, hey, this has people's attention. This is happening. So when I saw the 202, I was like, all right, I know. I don't really have many friends in DC anymore, so I know for sure that this is a call that is coming that is quite important, and I'm going to pick it up.
Better take this one.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
All right. So now, okay, maybe I'll answer the next unknown 202 number call I get. Okay. So when you engage with the White House, did you get any sense, or what was your sense of their like pre-existing knowledge of the problem, and their sort of attitudes that preceded your work? Maybe like, did you get the idea that they had been thinking about this, or looking at it, working on it, wanting, or like did this come out of the blue for them?
My sense, and again, I didn't ask directly, so I can only give you my kind of sense and interpretation. But my sense is that, people who are involved in politics, they know this stuff, but it's kind of like in Republican circles and conservative circles has been just like, oh, we don't like this, but there's nothing we can do about it, has been kind of the general attitude. We can cut taxes, but we can't fight a culture war. That's kind of like the kind of formula. And my sense is that, the president, I don't know if he's well versed in critical race theory. I kind of am skeptical that he was. I doubt it. Because he's a business guy. He's like a bare knuckle business guy, kind of like a more visceral political creature. And my sense is that he saw it, and he said, "This is a complete outrage. Get it done." And I think you hear stories about Reagan in the same kind of vein. Where he just would, go into a room, they're having some big meeting. He says, "I don't know when, you figure it out." And I think there's that same kind of energy and same kind of decisiveness. And so I think that this is really a totally new territory. And, the writer for First Things, Mark Bauerlein, wrote yesterday, he says, for 5 decades, conservatives have been told that we can't stop identity progressivism. We can cut taxes, we can reduce regulation, but we'll never win these fights. And in his analysis, I think it's true. This is really the first time that we've successfully counterattacked. And all credit, frankly, goes to the president. He's the person who just made it happen. And I don't think there's really any other political figure, with maybe the exception of a Josh Hawley, who would have taken that kind of bold and decisive action.
That is why I supported Donald Trump in 2016. I saw the writing clearly on the wall, starting all the way back. Even for me, like 2010 is when I began this sort of red pilling process, and I started pulling on this one thread, like, what's the up with feminism? That was how I started all of this, and I started pulling on the same thread. And here I am, 10 years later, having this conversation with you about this very thing, where Donald Trump, I mean, this is why I voted for the guy. I can't get over how excited I am that he's actually taking on the culture war head on. In my book, I outline all this stuff about critical race theory, social justice warriors, intersectionality, its history, its fusion with Marxism, etc. I've talked to James Lindsay months before Cynical Theories came out. We went through the whole thing. We talked about it, got it all out there for everybody to understand. Talked to Ryan Williams at Claremont, president of Claremont, talking about the need to fight multiculturalism. And how, basically we're at flight 93 status on all sorts of fronts, but one of them including fighting multiculturalism, which has at its root this idea, these critical race theory ideas, which is really just sort of now like an umbrella term that covers all kinds of stuff, but it has metastasized into this very specific thing. And that is why I voted for Donald Trump. I wanted him to fight the woke. I saw what was happening on college campuses. I interviewed Robbie Soav, who detailed, Title IX, misjustices and a lack of liberty all across the country. I've been to Evergreen State College. I went and spoke there after Brett Weinstein got booted on that whole fiasco. So like I went into the Viper's Den there, trying to talk about these things. So for me, I'm so excited to see you doing this, and for the president to have responded. This has been a life's mission for me for years now. And that's why I voted for Trump, among other reasons. But one was to fight the woke. And by golly, he is actually doing it now. So let's talk about, so the Seattle thing takes off. Then you have a couple of more big pieces. Like, walk us through the timeline. And then let's get to the orders, and then let's dig into the orders, because I want to talk about exactly what's going to happen there.
Yeah, the couple pieces that stand out, some like smaller pieces I do on Twitter, where it's like, hey, the FBI is holding a weekly intersectionality workshop. Like, this is completely insane. Like, they shouldn't do this. But it wasn't like a full. I didn't have the documents for like a full article. So I would kind of like pepper the small stories into the Twitter kind of ecosystem. And those would immediately kind of like replicate on the right, and then end up in news articles at Post Millennial or Twitchy or some of the kind of very buzzy, very social media publications. And then sometimes go up to the Fox News, the National Review, the American Conservative, et cetera. And then sometimes bump up to like a Tucker Carlson appearance. But I did the Treasury Department.
Let's
Go
stop.
ahead.
Let's stop right there because this is an interesting phenomenon. Talk about the info ecosystem that you just described, right? Like you source something, you put it out there, and then describe the cycle, like who picks it up and how. Like, well, this is a very interesting and important point in our new media landscape and the way that independent journalists and media people are actually driving narratives in a way that was never possible before. So
Yeah.
can you just describe that process, please?
Yeah, I'll break it down. It's kind of like once you see it, it's kind of like magic.
It
Or
is
when you see it on the
magic.
outside,
Yeah.
it's kind of like magic. But then
Yeah.
once you actually understand the principles and forces at play, it's kind of like, oh, it's just that. So, obviously, like, and I honestly only engaged in Twitter for the last maybe 5-6 months. I kind of just wasn't on it for some reason, but Twitter is kind of like the lifeblood of media right now. I mean,
Mhm.
that's just how it is. And then in conservative media is its own kind of world. So what you do is like what I would do is I'll kind of say, all right, I have a story. I think it's going to be a heater. I think it's going to be hot. And I'll basically write up a Twitter thread, embed some kind of documents, and then at the end I'll link to a story in City Journal or New York Post or whatever, wherever I'm writing. So I'll have an op-ed length piece that'll go into the bloodstream in the kind of mainstream publications. I'll drop a Twitter thread that kind of like can go viral there. And then I'll also send out an email blast to my email list, which has a lot of journalists, a lot of producers. Anytime I do a TV show or I make sure to say, hey, can I put you on my email list? So I know that all the kind of top conservative producers in the country are now on this list. So they'll see it either at New York Post or City Journal. They'll see it on Twitter. That'll kind of like replicate there, or they'll see it in my email list. And then, a big story will then get bumped up to kind of the primetime TV. And that audience is just, you cannot underestimate the power of that. I mean, like all of my aunt's friends are like, I saw you on TV yesterday.
Yeah,
You know
right.
what I mean? I mean, it
Right.
is like the audience is huge, and Tucker is at the top of the pyramid. I mean, he's getting like 4 million people a night, including a lot of the policy people. So if you can kind of, what I think of it is climbing the ladder. So like some stories, you climb the first little part, it's like a cool tweet, and then it dies. Some stories you kind of climb up, you write an op-ed, then maybe it'll go to the New York Post or the Wall Street Journal if that's like really nice. And then you try to keep climbing and just try to ride it. And then what happens is, then if you hit a big story, it starts to take on a life of its own.
Yeah.
And then you're like not in control. You're not fighting for stuff. You're not kind of like actively pursuing it. You're just literally like riding this wave. And this story, the last 90 days has been like a tidal wave. And then you're like, oh, okay. The New York Times is reaching out for comment. And then, Yahoo is going to do a hit piece on you. And then the Washington Post is all mad about it. And, someone wants you to debate them on NPR. And then you're just kind of managing appearances and managing when you fight back, when you ignore, and then really just trying to kind of like just stay in the flow of the story. And it's happened to me a number of times in the last year. This is obviously the biggest one, but it is like, it's this weird and completely terrifying, like surfing a hurricane wave, because like, yeah, I mean, these institutions could rip into you, man. And it's not fun. It's like, it's really not fun when some like the biggest publications in the world rip into you or someone's mad. And so you're kind of like trying to like get what you need to get done. But at a certain point you realize a lot of it's just out of my control, and you just have to kind of recognize what you can control, what you can't, and have the kind of wisdom to know the difference.
Oh, yeah, that's good advice for all kinds of things. That is an excellent example, and we know that the guys at the big media companies are all, the producers and the associates. They're all on social media. They're all on our social medias. They're all following us all the time, looking for stories. And I've seen it just happen, just time and time and time again. I think one of the first times that I really watched it happen was back in 2015 or early 2016, when there were questions about Hillary Clinton's health. And, the genesis of that story was on a small, not so small anymore, blog. I think Mike Cernovich was running it back then. And it just went kaplow, man. And it just took over the whole news cycle. And then from there, you could just see, took over the national conversations even. And then from there, you could just start to begin to see the ecosystem. And so, when people are on Twitter and they feel like they're fighting for something, or they feel like they're trying, and I don't mean like influencers, I mean just like regular people. They're trying to make a difference. They do. Every little like, every little retweet matters,
Yeah.
because the more it gets engaged, the more it gets promoted, the more people find it. You get connected to bigger nodes. It gains momentum. It finds a bigger node. It gains even more momentum. And before you know it, you're on Tucker Carlson and you're getting the president to take action. And so like people in the audience out there, like it really helps the engagement on stories that are meaningful and important. It really does make a difference. And I've seen it happen now just countless times. It's happened to me, not all the way to this scale just quite yet, but like I've seen, kicking off national stories and news cycles for the day. And just, it's good motivation for people to keep moving out there, and we're really all in this together, folks, like audience and creators and journalists. We're all in it together. And thank you. I want to say thank you to everybody. I know Chris is grateful, and it really does help. It matters when you engage with a tweet and a story and you promote it and you share it and you subscribe and you do whatever you can. It all matters, because the more people bring attention to a subject, the more likely, something is to get accomplished. So that's a very interesting, sort of side note into our new media ecosystem and how powerful, citizen journalists, info militias is a word I've been using, groups of people surfacing information, making propaganda, making information, films, movies, memes, whatever. It really matters. It really does matter. So keep it up, guys. Keep it up out there. All right. So the Treasury story is what's up next. How did that come about, and what happened?
Yeah, I got actually multiple leaks from the Treasury Department and the related financial agencies, because they were doing these trainings that were just, I mean, absolutely outrageous. And I'm trying to even think of specifics. They all kind of blur together at this point. But I mean, standard stuff like the United States is a fundamentally racist country. It can't redeem itself. The kind of like whiteness is the like scourge on the planet, and white cultural characteristics are just cover for white supremacy. I mean, like the standard kind of litany of critical race theory, kind of pseudoscientific claims, and they're just pushing it on, like, I think over the course of it, definitely more than 10,000 employees at the federal financial agencies.
Damn.
And I got multiple people saying, hey, this is completely outrageous. It's insulting. It has nothing to do with our job. We're trying to, like, this is like the Treasury Department. These are folks that like run the money supply of the United States. It's quite an important position. And they're doing these like race trainings where they're saying you need to go in a safe space and, apologize about this and blah, blah, blah. And it's like the documents were just absolutely shocking. And
right.
And that blew up, and I think that one actually the New York Post picked up as an op-ed, and then they put the kind of punchy title on it, that you can't choose, and they really go nuts,
right? Sometimes the titles, you got to get people to click sometimes, and I myself, I've adopted the policy of like, I will use the clickbaity title, but I promise it's all me underneath. So you got to get people to take an action there. But dude, I one of the reasons I want to talk to you is because I too have been working on similar work, and it's been personal. So like you're describing these trainings that's happening in the Department of Treasury and in Seattle and elsewhere, and I have lived it myself, and I have been fighting it. When after I was executive director at charter schools in DC, I went to work for the regulator, the authorizer, the charter school authorizer, and I was the top finance manager for almost $1 billion worth of charter schools, right?
Wow.
And so it was my job to make sure that they were doing everything they needed to do financially, right? But as I'm getting onboarded there, it's clear that they have these diversity, inclusion, and equity meetings, and they have secret subcommittees.
Oh, wow.
And where they plan out what the trainings are going to be. And I happened to come across they gave me my predecessor's emails, right? So I'm going through the emails looking for stuff that I need on another subject, and I come across a picture of a whiteboard that was taken, what it was note taking for one of their diversity, inclusion, and equity planning sessions. And it was the vision of this organization, which is a DC, which is quasi federal agency managing charter schools in District of Columbia educators. And it says right there on the whiteboard, there's too many white people working here. Okay. Like this is their like sanctioned secret committee that's planning how they're going to do their hiring and their organization and whatnot. And around this conversation that I stumbled across in the email were all these pre-meeting documents they sent around. And this was before White Fragility came out, but it was definitely D'Angelo's work, right? And it was all the same stuff that we know about now, that, you know, all systems, all Black suffering is due to systems of white oppression, and white supremacy is like punctuality and science and data and rugged individualism and like perfectionism and like getting things done, you know, like all this crazy shit. But these were like, and I think you've probably seen this too, these were mostly youngish to middle-aged white women who had drank whatever this Kool-Aid was, and they are now evangelicals for it and pushing it throughout the entire system and through the entire nation. And I resisted in a staff meeting. I said, wait a second. I've done some research. I had been reading Jesse Singal at that point, and he has done great work on debunking the implicit association test. And I like, you know, I'm a big guy, and I'm not very timid usually, but I timidly raise my hand and I'm like, you know, the guy that created this test has already said that it's not useful or predictive and we shouldn't be doing anything with it. And they just didn't care. Nobody cared. And eventually, I got fired from this institution because they didn't like the fact that I just thought differently. And when we talk later about this order, which says hostile work environments, man, I sat there and lived through a hostile work environment where they were explicitly saying there's too many white people working here, which just blew my mind. Like, you dream about it or you read about it and you think it's not real, and then you're sitting there and you're experiencing it and you're like, but wait a second, they say I can't be, you know, there's no such thing as racism against white people, institutional racism. Wait, this institution is saying that white people are bad, we need to get rid of them, and nobody seemed to care. And now, you know, afterwards, I have sent in FOIA requests that they have now denied. I'm trying to get everything I can out of there, and they're denying their FOIA requests and putting them off due to COVID. Have you had any difficulties? I mean, you sound like you've been able to do document requests and just get them. Nobody's like, who's been fighting? And people have been fighting.
Oh, they're always fight, man. They always fight. And, you know, a lot of it is leaked, though. So these are like whistleblower documents. So these are people on the inside who I think agree with what I'm doing. And they say, hey, you're the guy. This is something that's happening that's completely outrageous. Here's a kind of zip file full of the documents that show what's happening. And then I'll do the kind of the investigative work to call everyone at the organization to confirm and to find out if they're, you know, legitimate, and kind of do the paper trail. But when you start with the actual documents, you're in a good place. But on the FOIA side, yeah, I've had people deny FOIA requests. I just did one for King County, Washington, or the county of Seattle. And you know, they denied it for a long time as documents that I knew they had. So then I just like spun up some legal threats basically and said, hey, if you do not give this to me now, I know you have it, I will sue you personally and I will sue your agency. And then 24 hours later, they cough up all the documents. I mean, you know, FOIA is a process that in theory works well and you get everything. But in practice, there's a lot of ways where they can throw roadblocks in your way. So you have to just keep pushing. But I found on the document side, when you get inside whistleblower documents, those are always a great place to start. And then you can follow up with you know, PDRs, public document requests.
When you get to where you are now, you become you're like a gravity point. You're like a black hole for leaks and information. And now everybody wants to get their information out, and they see you rightfully as a great conduit from their lips to the president's ears, basically. I mean, what an incredible position for you to be in, that a whistleblower in some county in some state somewhere can send you information about something that they're experiencing that's terrible, that's hostile workplace, that's actual racism, that's actually causing them. It caused me, I'll admit it, it caused me emotional distress to be in an environment where everybody's sitting around going, you're a fucking racist just because you asked this question, right? Like, And so these people now have a way, citizens, think social media, God bless, it giveth and it taketh, but in this case, it giveth. They got connected to you. They send you the documents. You put it together. You run your stories. You call on the president to make change.
I know.
And here we are, dude.
I know. I know. It's kind of weird if you think about it. It's like a night, and I feel bad almost because there's a lot of great people that have been working on this issue for a long time. And I feel like kind of like the new kid on the block that like comes in and just like, puts in a pretty low effort 90 days and gets something big done. So I feel some guilt, I guess, but also I know that this work is on the shoulders of a lot of great people. I mean, a lot of the people you mentioned have been working on this issue and laid the foundation for this. And, I was able to kind of carry the ball the last couple yards. But there's been a ton of people on the left, on the right, in the center that see the threat that kind of unchecked wokeism presents. And then I think, I guess like I would say my role and my kind of what I brought that was different is like I'm just a conservative, like I'm just a conservative. I think a lot of the problem is that a lot of the kind of people who are like, oh, maybe like disaffected left, they would never think of calling on Donald Trump to do something about it because it's just out of their kind of cultural comfort zone.
Right.
But it's like, I'm affiliated with Discovery Institute in Seattle, where I'm the research center director. I'm affiliated with Manhattan Institute and City Journal, conservative think tank in New York, and now a visiting fellow at Heritage Foundation, the kind of most venerable and largest conservative, very kind of establishment conservative think tank. So it's like, I have no compunction. I am who I am. I my friends are my friends. And I think that gave me maybe a bit more of a kind of risk reduction for the political folks to say, okay, this guy is for sure on our team. And the people that are backing him, the people that are supporting this campaign, the people that are advocating, if we have those people, the kind of conservative establishment is now waking up to this threat and wants to take action, we're safe to actually push on this. So I think it really complemented a lot of the work, frankly, from the people on the kind of old left that offered the first criticism. And then, we were able to put it into action.
Man, you said a lot there. One thing, kudos to you for acknowledging that a lot of this work is done on the shoulders of people that have been pressing on this issue for a while. I agree with that 100%. One person's name comes to mind is Jordan Peterson. He was somebody who really was instrumental in bringing this issue into the dialogue in our little niches and then blowing it up into a much larger conversation. I think a lot of us owe some credit to him for putting a human face, an empathetic face, and a real emotional appeal on these subjects and on the subject matter. It was one thing for me to be writing my like anti-radical feminist screed blog stuff in 2015. But then, Jordan Peterson does it with empathy and kindness and compassion. And I think he inspired a lot of people to take action and to push the conversations along. So kudos to you for acknowledging that. But dude, props to you though, because you were like, you raised the energy level and you had a goal and you had a target and you had a mission and you did it and you went and you spoke and you made that call to action, right? Like that, that is what people miss, is the call to action and being persuasive enough to call someone to action and get them to act. So, kudos to you for that. I'm impressed and I'm energized in talking to you and just seeing that, in showing like what is possible if you just take it even farther, even another step farther and another step farther and chunk it up even bigger into a bigger issue and make bigger claims and put it in the right context, which is what I think that you have done, at the same time as giving voice to the voiceless out there, just regular folks suffering through this kind of nonsense, which truly is a form of emotional abuse, right? It's gaslighting. It's telling you that your own perceptive tools are faulty, that you see the world, but you see it incorrectly. And not only do you see it incorrectly, but you're flawed for it. And not only are you flawed for it, but here, my job, my federal employer job, I am here to brainwash you and beat you over the head with a hammer until you answer these questions the right way, using the right words. And we think that you mean it. And if you don't mean it, you're going to have to go back through the trainings again, and you're going to have to regurgitate all this shit. And it's a struggle session. It's a struggle session that happens at work. It's happening in our children's schools. So I'm going to rant for a second. In my kids' schools in Montgomery County, Maryland, I got a notice saying that they were going to have, quote, courageous conversations. And I looked up courageous conversations.
They're from Seattle. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're like, we're just going to use this courageous conversations compass to have a talk about what happened in Kenosha and Jacob Blake and Kyle Rittenhouse. And I started to dig into it, and dude, it is like the epitome of critical race theory. And one of the things that they say right in this thing they're giving to our teenagers is, you need to sit with your whiteness. You need to experience your whiteness. And if it makes you uncomfortable, good. You're supposed to feel uncomfortable. Don't listen to your internal alarm bells. Don't listen to your instincts saying that this is wrong. Don't listen to your your mind telling you to run away. Sit here and suffer and do it until and as long as we deem necessary, to the point at which, and you've seen the stuff that was posted in the Smithsonian, that light blue, like expanding bubble chart where it's like your beginning work and your end work. And the end work is, I yield the anti-racist, right? The goal of all of this is I yield positions of power to people of color. Yeah. That is the goal, to yield positions of power to people of color simply because you are white. I hate talking about this race shit, dude. I'm Gen X. I was raised to be colorblind. I was raised to judge people on the content of their character. And that's what I did my whole life. And I ignored all that shit until somebody else said, hey, buddy, race is important now. And it's your race that's the issue. And in fact, this whole fucking country is the issue because of you and your people. And so what are we going to do? You can't just sit back, because they're coming for you, and they're coming for your children, and they're coming for your jobs, and they're coming for your government, they come for your universities. There's no ignoring it anymore. There's no just hoping it goes away. And with the events of this summer and the riots and the protests and the statues and the arson and the murders and Antifa and Black Lives Matter, when I see it's the whole context, and in there is a direct attack on my children and their impressionable minds, then it's too much, man. So I'm doing my best to see what we can do about that in Montgomery County, also in Washington, D.C. as well. And all right, that's the end of my rant. Okay. So,
I would add one point, because I think it's a really important one, and it's one that I kind of end up on. And, I did a film for PBS about 3 of America's poorest cities. It's called America Lost. We can send a link to your viewers. They can watch it for free before it comes out on TV. But
what was the name again?
America Lost. And
America Lost. Okay.
Yeah, and I'll send a link out that you can send out. But I spent really 3 years of field production, kind of 5 years total, just spending time and understanding the poorest neighborhoods in Memphis, Tennessee, and Stockton, California, and Youngstown, Ohio. Multiracial, kind of mostly white community in Memphis, mostly black community, actually almost exclusively black community in Memphis, and then a kind of Latino and multiracial community in Stockton, California. And the thing about critical race theory that I think is probably the point that people don't say, but I think to me is the most important point, is that critical race theory does absolutely nothing to help kind of ethnic minorities and racial minorities in America's poorest neighborhoods. In fact, it actually is a deeply pessimistic and deeply destructive ideology, because it tries to teach that there's nothing you can do to be successful. Everyone's out to get you. Hard work and showing up on time is actually white supremacy, in all of the ways that throughout kind of history, and Thomas Sowell has done great work on this, that minority groups and immigrant groups, my father included, were able to become successful, the kind of formula that actually, works over time. They're really trying to demolish all of those foundational kind of pillars. They're saying the nuclear family is just white supremacy. It's like, well, actually, if you have a 2-parent household compared to a single parent household, your chances of being in poverty are like stratospherically different. Yeah. And actually, what here's the thing: critical race theory serves the interests of a kind of multiracial progressive elite it gets people university appointments, it gets them Aspen Institute presentation, it gets them, kudos for the New Yorker, but it actually is deeply destructive to racial and ethnic minorities in America's poorest cities. And that to me is the greatest moral crime of critical race theory. It's something that I saw. I kind of walked with these folks for 5 years, really understood the communities from the inside out. And I can tell you that critical race theory has nothing to offer in a way that's constructive, in a way that helps people reach their full potential, in a way that expresses the values of freedom and equality. And that's why I'm going to fight against it with everything I got.
I couldn't agree with you more. In my experience as an education professional in Washington, D.C., I had a lot of chance to look at, discuss, describe, analyze, and think about the achievement gap, the difference in education outcomes achieved by people of varying races and socioeconomics. And the scary thing that I found with critical race theory is that it takes all of the onus off of educators, students, and families. Their outcomes are no longer their responsibility. So I would see time and time again people coming to testify in front of our authorizer saying, oh, well, our scores aren't good enough because, the system, right? Like, we can't help these kids. They're coming from the system. The system is flawed. It's a racist system, blah, 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 blah. All it means is that the families, the students, the schools, the teachers, and the principals don't have to take responsibility for the outcomes. And what I have been harping on myself for years about the achievement gap is that it distracts us from the real issues, and the real issues are difficult. They're huge. They start at home. It's family issues. It's mother's education. It's the zip code in which people live in. And it's not about the fact that like your science teacher supports Donald Trump and therefore he's like holding you back. It's just not right. And it distracts people from the issue at hand. And then we just throw more money at it and more money at it. And the distraction itself becomes even bigger. And then the real losers, the number one losers, are minority children, mostly in the cities, and they're not being given the person who is up there, who's already sort of made it out. They're not reaching their hand back and saying, look, this is how you get up the ladder, dude. Follow me. This is what we do. Now they're just like, burn the whole ladder down, throw the ladder. Fuck it. There's no way we can get out of here. So let's just burn the whole thing down. And that was the question that people always bring up is like, okay, so if all these things are white supremacy, like individualism, being on time, data, science, like basically the American way, right? Or Western way. If all these things are white supremacy, like what is the opposite? Like, what are we going to replace it with? With like being laid and not focusing on data and not looking at science.
And these people don't mean any of it. That's the other thing. These people don't mean any of it. The people who are putting up the charts that showing up on time is white supremacy, guaranteed they show up on time.
Right.
When it's a faculty meeting or an appointment or a grant, distribution.
Right.
That's the other thing. This stuff is deeply phony and brings me back to our first point in the conversation when I'm sitting in college and realizing these kind of like radical elites are completely ridiculous, phony people. Yeah. It's the same thing. And I think that like it's almost like you can't even debate the ideas because they're so stupid and just kind of degraded intellectual thinking. Yeah. You have to just say, you don't even believe that. Really? Okay. Show up late to your job now. Show up 15 minutes late from now on, and they couldn't do it. Right. There's no way they could do it. No. Objectivity. Okay. Let's get rid of objectivity. Let's see how that works. Math. They're saying math is white supremacist. And it's like, oh, really? That's quite interesting. Because my oldest son, who is half Asian, happens to be a top 1% math student. Am I going to explain to him that actually this is his white supremacy emerging? Like this stuff is all ridiculous. And it's like almost, I think there's a time and place for serious debate, but there's a time and place just to throw your hands up and say, I don't accept it.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. James Lindsay's done God's work in trying to debate and debunk and to work with all of this and explain it and whatever. But at some point, man, you have to just punch a dude in the face. Literally, not literally, guys, figuratively out there. You just have to fight back. You have to fight back because I've made this mistake in relationships and other shit in the past where you keep trying to apply a rational lens to irrational behavior.
Yeah.
And you're like, but that doesn't make any sense. Why would they do that? I don't understand that.
Yeah.
And there's no arguing your way out of it. There's no convincing them. And they're hitting you over the head with a sledgehammer already. So at this point, that's all there is left to do, is to fight back. And that's what we're doing. That's what you're doing. That's what you've been doing. And the result of it, and this is, I want to get into the meat of this now. The Trump executive order that was just released. I'm going to show. We've got, let's see,
Cool.
let me see if I can do it here. We've got Chris's website. This is his latest article. President signs executive order abolishing critical race theory. You can find Chris on Twitter at Real Chris Rufo. And so this is where Chris laid out what he has been describing today. All of this is on Twitter as well. And now let's get into the executive order. So Chris, describe the executive order, describe what happened, what you see. Let's just go through it, and what is it going to do, and what are the expected or hoped for outcomes here?
Yeah. So, I'll pull it up here on my side too, because it's been so exciting. My brain is kind of operating at 70%. So, I'll kind of give you the main points. And, first off, the president has done something, I think, quite extraordinary. He's now really framing this election on critical race theory, 1619 Project, riots, which are all kind of like unified under the same ideology, versus the Declaration of Independence, which is a very Claremontian theme.
Right.
And he's really going there. And I think it's, he gave a speech at the National Archives, I guess last week, on this theme, denouncing critical race theory by name. And he basically does the same thing here. He says, critical race theory is a false and pernicious and false belief that undermines the American ideal that all men are created equal. So he kind of sets the kind of philosophical framework there. And then he basically says, hey, this malign ideology is now migrating from the fringes of American society and threatens to affect core institutions of our country. The writers very, very kindly cited a bunch of my reporting on the issue for specifics. And then he gets into really what's happening. And this is, again, something he went, the White House team, to their credit, to their enormous credit, went well beyond even the initial OMB memo or my initial call to action. And they're basically saying the federal funds cannot go to any institution that supports critical race theory. So critical race theory can no longer happen in federal agencies. It can no longer happen in the military. And then the third thing, which is really key, it can no longer happen in corporations that are federal contractors. And this is important because I would say a majority of Fortune 500 companies at least are actually federal contractors. So and the executive order is written in a way, and I confirmed the intent with the White House. If you are like a Microsoft or an Amazon or a Walmart or whatever, I don't know, any kind of big corporation that does government contracting, after 60 days from yesterday, you can no longer teach critical race theory programs anywhere in your company, private side or public sector side, because it is now a requirement to do business with the federal government. You cannot be teaching these anti-American principles. And then a couple other hard hitters, he said, hey, he's instructing all of his agency heads to say no more grants that support critical race theory. And I think the real target here is academia. So the National Science Foundation and the other kind of humanities endowments, arts endowments can no longer distribute money to projects that are based on critical race theory. So that academic spigot is closed.
Now, does that mean I understand with the corporations, it's like if the corporations are engaging in this stuff, you can't do business with the U.S. government. But does this mean that, like, let's say, for example, high schools across the country, a lot of them get Title I funding, in poor and low income areas. And then they get Title I funding that's for specific things. But then they also at the same time are pushing this, critical race theory based initiatives within their schools. Does that mean that they can't get the Title I funding anymore? Or
no? This on my reading, and again, I confirmed this wouldn't cover that in my view. It really is contractors or direct expenditures. So the actual federal grant money can't support directly a critical race theory program. But here's the big kind of asterisk that is in Section 8 of the memo of the executive order, rather. He instructs the Attorney General, and hopefully the Attorney General will be around for a little bit, 4 more years to implement it, to assess whether critical race theory trainings create a hostile work environment and constitute a violation of Title VII of the Civil Rights Act. This is big because Peter Kirsanaw, who's on the U.S. Civil Rights Commission, and others have basically said, these are kind of, your race is a protected class, right? You can't discriminate on the basis of race. You can't kind of harass someone or retaliate against someone on the basis of race. And these programs and trainings are likely violations of the Civil Rights Act. So he is opening the legal floodgates. And I think the next step in this campaign is really to recruit a network of lawyers that will file suits anywhere and everywhere to get the case law and to get the precedent to say that these are actually hostile work environments. They violate Title VII. They create kind of racial. They constitute a form of racial harassment. So I think that is really the big next step, and I think that could be big for a couple reasons. Because you can kind of directly win those cases. You can set the precedent and the case law. But also corporations and even to a certain extent universities are very risk averse. So if we raise the cost of doing this stuff, I think their HR departments and legal departments will quickly say, it's not worth the risk. Let's can all these programs. So I think that the president's team is really trying to figure out what are the levers of power that we control and how can we shift the incentives for our major institutions to doing these things. And this is going after the bureaucracy. It's going after schools and universities, and it's going after increasingly our kind of woke corporations.
I'm pumped, dude. I'm so excited when I hear these things. Yes, by God, it creates a hostile work environment. Jeez Louise. I mean, I remember just sitting there and just feeling bad. Like just because I was white. It's insane. It is a hostile work environment. And what's funny is these same people will have turned around and beforehand said that, their preferred tool was to say, oh, you're creating a hostile work environment. But, the truth is whatever they accuse you of is what they're doing themselves already. So I, for one, like, for example, in the super chat here, we had Megan. Megan asks, my child's school started an anti-racism program and I don't know how to start obstructing it. Like, what should I do? How do I go the distance here? How do I win? And, I think it's a very difficult thing to do on an individual level. But now that the president has tied it, directly from his executive order, he's empowering the attorney general to take action, tying it to Title VII and civil rights and hostile work environment and hostile, violating protected classes. That's a good vector. Like, if you're going to go to these meetings, you got to go to the meetings. First of all, you got to go to the meetings and show up where these things get decided, especially in your schools and the PTA and at the school board meetings and the equity committee meetings and stuff. And you have to say, maybe bring it up. This is what the president is talking about. Is this a violation of civil rights? And just get that. Like, people do get scared when lawsuits can start flying and money starts happening and the risk level gets raised. I think for too long, all these people thought that they were just had a free ride. Mm-hmm. They could do whatever they wanted. They could say whatever they wanted. They could take whatever action they wanted without any consequences. And of course, because they believe that they're fighting a religious war, a moral war, that they're the ones who are right. Everyone that opposes are wrong and immoral and really even like subhuman. Right? Like, how can you be a human being if you aren't anti-racist, right? And of course, to be anti-racist now means you can't even, quote, unwittingly participate in a system that reinforces Black oppression. Like, so you just walk down the street, you don't know what's going on, and buddy, you're a racist. And so
it's so dumb. Like, the logic of that, I was thinking about that the other day. It's like, there's no such thing as not racist. That's a new thing. You can't be not racist. You're either anti-racist, so you're either a political and ideological progressive, or you're racist. It's like, oh, really? Right. Well, guess what? What are you doing to actively combat Lyme disease? Nothing. Oh, well, then you love when people die of Lyme disease, you monster. It's such a basic kind of logical idiocy. And yet it's being pumped at the highest levels of media, at the highest levels of academia, at the highest levels of the federal bureaucracy. And it's like, I find myself feeling like we're increasingly in some kind of soft totalitarian regime where, all of the official organs of the state and the culture are telling you one thing that is so preposterous on its face. And yet people are being socially pressured to comply. that it's like it's too much. And I think that what we're finding now, certainly the president has elevated this to the national stages. People are starting to say, no, I don't agree. That's enough is enough. This is wrong. I'm going to fight it. I'm going to resist it. And I think once we push on these people intellectually, kind of their arguments start to crumble because they're very kind of foundationally weak. And then institutionally, they start to kind of hide and get scared and kind of pull back. And that's what I told Dave Rubin yesterday, or a couple of days ago, I guess. I said, why do we have the attitude that we can't win? Like, I don't believe that. Like, I know for sure that we can win. I don't even think it's gonna be that hard. He's like, what? So it's like and obviously it will be hard. It's everywhere, blah, blah, blah. But the attitude that we have to have is that we are confident of victory. Yeah. We are confident that we are kind of morally justified. We are confident that we are intellectually justified, and we're confident that our position will win. And I think that's the attitude that we have to have. And I think like part of it is like these terms, right? These epithets: you're a racist, you're a white supremacist, you're a sexist, you're a transphobe, you're whatever. Like the whole litany of them. 5 years ago was like, oh my God, I'm terrified. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, like my whole life is over. Somebody called me this, even if it's totally out of bounds, totally unfair, totally inaccurate. The power of those words was enough to deter any real resistance from most people.
Yeah.
Those words have been debased and degraded to such an extent that they don't mean anything anymore. I mean, you have articles that are saying square dancing is white supremacist, math is white supremacist, logic is white supremacist. It's like, okay, well, I guess this word actually has lost any meaning and any power. So
yeah,
the kind of asymmetry is now flipped, where those words used to be like an atom bomb level power. Now they're kind of like a street sweeper that are just kind of shuffling around in the background, trying to clean things up. Right. So we have an opportunity rhetorically and in our kind of cultural vocabulary to now take the dominant position and to push on these people and to have much less fear of the kind of insults and epithets that might come our way.
Dude, beautifully said. Beautifully said. I remember reading in 2017 or so, Jordan Hall, who's a very excellent futurist and philosopher and a former tech guy. Yeah, he wrote about something called the resistance of the red religion. And basically what he's saying is that the blue church, which is the deep state and the resistance and all these guys have taken a scorched earth policy, called everyone a racist, tried to kill everybody by using these horrible insults, which, God, I mean, I still have visceral memories of when that word held weight, right? Like that was like the last thing you ever wanted to be called.
Totally. It's horrible.
It was the worst. And now they've used it so much that the only thing that's left standing are people that are resistant to that. And like, you just can't, it's like a bacteria that can't be killed by antibiotics or whatever. Like you just can't kill us with that anymore. It's done. And so the earth has been scorched. We are the only ones left standing. And now we're going to push back, and now we're going to take the fight to them. Do you think that this 2020 election is woke versus not? Is it the North versus the woke walkers? Like, is this the end? Is this the struggle? Is this what the decision is? Is this what the election is about now?
Yeah, well, yeah, and I'll give you some background. I didn't vote for Donald Trump in 2016. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't vote for Hillary. I couldn't vote for Trump. I just kind of was torn, and I ended up just completely wasting my vote on Gary Johnson, just as kind of like a kind of a safety valve, an easy out. I'm sure, honestly, probably many people listening are in the same boat.
Definitely.
Because I had those reservations, right? In a way, to kind of, I said, oh, Donald Trump, this guy, and I don't know, and he's a kind of a wild card, and he's going to be this, he's going to be that. But a couple things happened that I think started changing my mind. One is that he actually tried to keep or kept most of the promises on the campaign trail. Yep. He's delivered conservative Supreme Court justices. He has not fought any new wars. I mean, which is like an achievement that I think dates back to the 1970s. Right. He's the only president since maybe Carter, to not launch any new wars. And then I think that this, for me, the last month sealed the deal. Because he's, I think, very much framed the election as kind of wokeism versus the American way of life. And
there you go.
And I mean, cool. Like I feel like kind of amazed. It's like, wow, I had some part in this framing, because the last, he was going to run on the kind of economy, right? The economy's great. Everyone's happy. Look at your 401k. You're making more money than ever. Unemployment's low. The coronavirus wiped out that rationale.
Yep.
And then the riots happened. And I think you saw him kind of with the virus and the riots and the economy very uncertain for a period. And then I think everything clicked in this campaign where he said, actually, all these things are connected. The 1619 Project, critical race theory trainings, the riots on the streets, they're all the Black Lives Matter kind of more extreme ideologies. They're all rooted in this worldview that is not rooted in any American tradition. It's rooted in a European tradition and a Marxist tradition. It's rooted in the kind of identity politics emerging from the Frankfurt School. And it is a threat to the American way of life, the American regime, the American system that has, for its faults, of course, we have to admit, always moved steadily towards equality and freedom. And I think that kind of, once that clicked, and then I think maybe this critical race theory trainings gave him another kind of tangible thing to hold on to. The speech at the National Archives, which I recommend everyone listen to, the speeches he's giving during the campaigns, this executive order, fighting against 1619 Project. He's really framing this election as a very simple choice. Do you want to preserve the American way of life, or do you want to burn it down?
Indeed.
That's the question. And when that is the question, for me, I have one answer. And it's like, I want to preserve the system. I want to improve it. I want to acknowledge our past flaws and imperfections like every society has. But ultimately, America is worth fighting for. The American principles are correct. They've enabled us to have a country for almost 250 years that has some of the most astonishing achievements from people of all different backgrounds. We went to put a man to the moon. We invented the airplane. We invented the automobile. We invented the personal computer. We invented jazz. We invented hip hop. We invented rock and roll. These are things that are not kind of trivial accomplishments. These are kind of world historical things that have emerged from our system. And we produced the great literature from Frederick Douglass to Martin Luther King to the great writers of the 20th century. And to me, that's something that's worth saving. And I just feel like the energy on the left is to burn it all down with this kind of naive hope that when you destroy something naturally better will emerge. And I think that is the height of naivete. And I think it's the height of folly.
Yeah. Wow. Very well said, Chris. I really appreciate that. And I do appreciate you acknowledging sort of your own political evolution. And I know that there's been a number of people who saw, I always want to talk to Eric Weinstein about this, who saw the risks that, social justice and critical race theory have played or have posed to Western civilization, like legit, straight up risk to Western civilization. In my book, I called a vote for Donald Trump a vote to save Western civilization. And yet they were unwilling or unable or some reason to say in 2016, like, oh, Western civilization worth saving. Why don't I vote for this guy that says, yay, America? Or on the other team is like, no, boo, America, right? That's what it basically is coming down to. And so I'm happy to see a number of people at least leaving the left and saying, all right, I can't support that shit anymore. And they have to go through their own process to where they can finally assess the risk, the various risk elements that you have to assess when you're going to pick a president, and finally come to acknowledge that critical race theory, Black Lives Matter, Antifa, radical feminism, intersectionality, all of this poses an actual existential risk to the republic, to the American experiment, to Western civilization, to our future development, because our system is the one that creates the development, the technological advances, the cultural advances, etc. We risk just throwing all that away because Kimberly Crenshaw decided to make her maps of, intersectional oppression or whatever in the 80s. And here we are. It's carried through all the way to this point. So I call on all of you fence sitters out there, the ones that can see the problem, who assess the risk, but are unwilling to take the steps necessary to protect the republic and protect Western civilization. I'm kind of tired of you free riders, to be honest. I took a big risk, man. I got arrows in my back. I got shot up. I got doxxed. I got swatted. I got banned from coaching Little League. Got time taken away from my kids. My family got damaged, all because I took a risk. Hey, buddy, take a risk. Protect the American way of life and America, Western civilization. Protect the Republic. This is it. 2020, maybe one of the last chances we have. If Trump loses in November, Biden takes over, this EO goes in the wastebasket.
Yeah,
All this
I
shit
know.
gets looked upon as
I
if it
know.
were just a blip, a momentary, disruption. And now not only are they going to throw it away, but then they were going to do everything they can to, quote, make sure this never happens again. Make sure there was never another Trump. Make sure all these Trumpists get what's coming to them. We got to do whatever, throw some gulags or whatever, metaphorical or literal. Who knows at this point, and so if we want to see this continue, if we want this momentum to continue, we got to vote for Trump in 2020. I believe that the American people, the more that they understand what's happening, the more they're going to support this. In my book, I interviewed hundreds of people, did a national survey, like 1,500 people responded with 15 questions each, 1,500 responses of 15 short answer questions, where I read like 15,000 paragraphs from people. And they all have a sense. They know, oh, I can't say this thing, or I can't do that thing, or why is that man who is now a woman beating up this other woman in an MMA cage? Like, they have the sense something is wrong, but they, hadn't been able to put a target on something. And you, sir, have helped all of us put the target where it needs to go. You have been like the sighter. I don't know what the technical term is, the spotter, I guess.
Yeah.
And you're like, over here, Mr. President, turn the guns over this way.
Yeah.
And the machine, like, and then boom, zeroing right in. And I am just super excited. I'm like, we really have just started talking for the first time today, but we've crossed paths for a while on Twitter. I'm proud of you, dude. Like,
thank you.
Like,
That's
way to
nice,
go, man. And like, on a personal level, it must be so satisfying to see this alignment with your work and your mission and your values and the country and the national stories, and sort of like a singularity all happening for you all at once, and real things happening. So congratulations.
I appreciate that. Yeah, it really is that. It feel like everything kind of clicked in, and honestly, all these things were really kind of chance, kind of very improbable things that all happened in this kind of intricate succession. That at any one point it could have all gone off the rails, and this wouldn't have happened. So I feel like, wow, just blessed and just fortunate, and kind of divinely inspired, because it's like, wow, this all happened, and it's a great thing. And I'm told too, this is a kind of a fun tidbit, but I'm told that there is a package coming my way, and the president is sending me the pen that he used to sign the executive order. So that to me is like a cool little, like a token of this victory. And it's going to be right up there. And, one of the things here you'll see here is actually, it looks like just a rock, piece spray painted concrete, but it's actually a piece of the Berlin Wall.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. My grandmother was there actually when the wall came down in West Germany on vacation with my grandfather. And they took a pickaxe to the wall, and they brought home a couple chunks for us. And I keep that there because I feel like you can never forget what it's like to live in a repressive regime. And it's a reminder that, people, the kind of institutions can build walls, but we can also tear them down. And right across from it will be that pen, to show the power of public policy, the power of language, the power of the pen. And then, of course, a great compliment to the power of my emoji of choice, the crossed swords.
Love it.
So it's all fun, man. Yeah.
The emoji of choice, swords up, dude. And like, I love that. I'm tying it also with like wartime conservative. Like, we're going to meme this into a real big thing, like swords up for sure. No time to sit back, time to fight.
Time to fight, man. Yeah. And it's fun. And it's like, it's tongue in cheek. It's ironic. It's funny, but like, we have to have fun too. Like, that's the thing. I can feel it in you. I know you're having a great time. You're having fun. You're enjoying it. And we have to get people through that wall of fear to the point where your courage is grounded. And then you can kind of take on the monster, because you've been through it. And I think we need more leaders and cultural leaders and political leaders that can get there and kind of stand with us and fight, because it's like there's nothing more beautiful than being in the middle of some huge melee and just trying to fight your way out.
and being on the right side of history, for sure, and fighting your way out. So tremendous work, amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Chris. Congratulations to you. Guys who are listening out there, please go to Real Chris Rufo on Twitter. Go to ChristopherRufo.com, sign up for his mailing list, join his Patreon, support his work. Listeners to Jack Murphy Live, please hit subscribe wherever you are, whether it's on YouTube, on Spotify, on iTunes or iHeartRadio or Stitch or wherever else. Hit subscribe. Thank you so much, Chris. I really appreciate it. I can't wait to talk to you again in a couple of weeks or a month or so, see where this thing goes. We'll certainly stay in touch through the election and whatever drama comes out of the election, whatever it's going to be like November 3rd to January. Who knows what's really going to happen there. So congratulations, guys. Everybody go check out ChristopherRufo.com, at Real Chris Rufo on Twitter. Support the cause. If you've got any information about critical race theory, trainings or programs or implementations in your organization or your government, agency or whatever, send them off to Chris, send them off to me. Let's get them out there. Let's expose them for what they are and get this shit taken out of our institutions, our schools, and everywhere else. Thank you very much, Chris. And I will talk to you very soon, buddy. Thanks a lot.
See ya.
All right, bye-bye.